I don't suppose anybody's asleep, are they? There wasn't but one thing wrong with that worship, brother. That was that I didn't get to play with them. You know, I told Brock, I said, man, I'll play the shaker. Just let me be up there. He wouldn't let me do it. Man, are y'all glad to be here this morning? Are y'all excited for the week? Me too. I am so excited. This is always like a little bit of a homecoming for me. I always get super emotional during this week, so just bear with me. There's no telling what's going to happen. Are y'all ready to get going in our series, though? We're on part 5 of our series, Looking for a Miracle, and I've got quite a bit to say today, so I'm going to talk maybe a little bit faster than I normally would. If you're just joining us, let me get you up to speed. We're discussing specific categories of miracles, 4 to be exact, and we're discovering truths that God's Word teaches us about miracles altogether in general. Simultaneously, as we're learning about miracles and we're learning about these categories of miracles, we're trying to discover, we're searching for clues in how we can facilitate more miracles happening in our lives and in the lives of the people to our left and to our right. Look around real quick. Just look around. Wouldn't you like to see that person experience a miracle if they're in need of it? I would too. There's no denying that people all around us are in desperate need of a miracle. We've already seen that throughout this series. There are people in this church, there's people that are watching online who are in need of God's intervention. They need His power, they need His authority, they need Him to be at work in their lives. They need God to act on their behalf, specifically for them. After all, that's exactly what a miracle is, right? All right, so you got the definition of a miracle. A miracle is a display of God's power in our lives that produces awe and wonder in us and reveals to the world that God is at work. All right, Donnie, repeat that. No, I'm just kidding. Don't have to do it, Donnie. I just want to make sure. I put him on the spot. He was like, already, we have learned that all sorts of miracles exist for us to stand in awe of, for us to see that God is working. The first is a miracle of authority. All right, I'm going to go real quick. Y'all ready? Miracles of authority. They reveal God's power and His authority over all things. These miracles are rule-breaking, and they should remind us to know who we are dealing with. Y'all got it? Everybody with me? The second category of miracles we talked about is miracles of healing, and these are miracles that restore our physical bodies as well as our spiritual lives. These miracles are beautifully thorough. Do y'all remember that? Addressing the finest details in the most wounded places of our souls. These are the beautifully thorough miracles. Like these are often the result of people who choose to be faithful friends who pray for us thoroughly. Therefore, God responds thoroughly. You got it? Last week, we looked at miracles of provision. And man, these are some cool miracles where God comes through providing something for us that we need badly. Often, we discovered these miracles are intentional collisions where God brings people together the right time, the right place, with exactly the right amount of resources, and most importantly, with the right hearts. He brings them together in order to perform a miracle among them. And this is what we discovered. Our willingness to give more than we are comfortable with is imperative in seeing God work an absolute miracle in that way. You got it? You got all of them? That's it. Now today we're going to discuss the fourth and final category of miracles. But before I do that, can I share a super important hunting story with y'all? We got to get the priorities in line. All right, here we go. When I was 19 or 20 years old, I loved hog hunting, wild boar hunting. For some of you, that's maybe what you understand it as. But not sitting in a tree stand waiting on a wild hog to come by. No, that's not how we did it. We used dogs. I had cur dogs. That's what we called them. That's right. Here's how it works. We would go to a place on the mountains that we hunted in the mountain laws, a steep country we'd take and let the dogs go, or we'd walk with the dogs down trails and normally do one loop. We would have like somebody take a truck around to the other side and we'd do one big cross, across a mountain or go through a long trail, 5 to 10 miles every time we went. And the dogs would smell, track, pursue, and eventually stop or bay a wild hog, have it run where it was tired, and then we would arrive and dispatch of the animal in the way that we chose. Sometimes, way back in the day, we'd actually catch them alive. It was a wild, wild west in the woods is what it was. 19 or 20-year-old Tim, I'm going to be honest with you, I was pretty tough. I was wiry. I loved running those mountains. I loved doing it. We would do it 3 to 4 nights a week while I was in school. I mean, we were chasing wild hogs, and we did it at nighttime. A lot of mornings we were coming in 3 or 4, sleeping a couple of hours, and then going and starting the day. It was awesome time. I had all the gear. I had the light. I had the radio. I had the pistol. I had the knife. I had the boots. I had all the stuff, okay? And we would go and we would chase these wild hogs. It was fun. Well, one particular night I had an exam, and I'd left school, headed home, and I knew the boys had told me where they were going to put out that night, and so I went up to that spot on the mountain, and nobody was there, and so I keyed up the radio, and I said, "Hey, Mike, where you at?" Because that's how you talk when you're hog hunting. And Mike said, "Man, we're way out on this trail." He told me where he was. He said, "We've already killed a pig. We left it back a while, and we're going to go ahead and hunt the loop. Roosters driving around the mountain to pick us up." And he said, "We'll either come back for the hog in the morning or we'll do something." And I said, "Hey, Mike, can I have it?" He said, "Sure." He said, "You just want to go in there and get it yourself?" I said, "Yeah, I'll just go get it myself, no problem. I'll see you guys tomorrow." He said, "Okay." Now, it was about 1.75 miles walk into where this hog was. He told me it was at a split in the trail, and it was just down in the valley right off the side of this mountain. I said, "Okay, no problem." So, man, old Tim goes hiking down through the woods all by myself. I get down there to the split in the trail. I go off the side down into where this creek was, found the wild hog laying in the creek. Took me a little while, I'm not going to lie. Found the hog, got it up, was getting it packed up and ready to go. I kind of was going to bounce between dragging it and carrying it on my shoulders the 1.75 miles out of the mountain. And as I was there, I was going to let Mike know, "Hey, I found the hog. I'm on my way out." I get on the radio, and he goes, "Tick." I'll never forget that noise. I said, "Tick, tick." Nothing. Radio's dead. I'm like, no big deal. Radio's dead. I hate that. Dummy me, I forgot to charge it, you know. So I put the radio up, I get the hog, and I start to turn to leave. All of a sudden, my light goes and goes out. And I'm like, that's weird. Take it, check it, pray with the buttons, hit the light, it comes on, right back out. I'm like, It was in this moment that I realized something. It was dark. Hang on a second. I don't mean like dark, like you can kind of see. There was no ambient light. It was cloud-covered night. There were no stars. There was no moon. There was no anything. You could not see. I'm not exaggerating. I had not even thought about this, not even realized it. You could not see your hand in front of your face. That's how dark it was in those woods. You could not see your breath, which was the second thing I realized, brother. I realized it's cold. I had already made this hike in, and I'm going to be honest with you, I'd started sweating a little bit just going in there, and I had been sitting there chilling for a few minutes, just easing around looking for that hog, where my sweat had begun to freeze on me. And I realized that real tough guy Tim had just chosen to wear a light jacket over a T-shirt and blue jeans, and it was the middle of January, February at night, 11 o'clock to midnight at night. I don't remember exactly the time. I had no cell phone, no radio, nothing, no light, could not see. Now, I wish I could tell you that Mountain Man Tim, that my keen sense of direction kicked in and I knew exactly the way to go. I would love to tell you that I heard the distant rumblings of a car and said, well, there's the highway, I'll just head that way. But that didn't happen. I would love to tell you that I found a nearby tree and rubbed until I found the moss, because I knew the moss would be on the south side of the tree, and that gave me the direction that I needed to make it out of the woods, but I didn't do that either. I wish I could tell you that I banged some rocks together or rubbed some sticks together, and I made a fire, and I threw a pine knot limb in the fire to get it lit and so I could have a torch to make it out of the woods, but I didn't do that either. Y'all know what I did? I panicked. I freaked out. I was all alone, no radio, no light, and I couldn't see anything. This is what I want to explain to you. This is the description of this situation. I could not take one step in confidence. Now, I know that's hard to understand. I was a 19, 20-year-old kid, and I could not take one step and know that I was headed in the right direction. I was that disoriented, just like that. I was trapped by the darkness. Do you understand that? I'm standing, Scott, you know what I'm talking about. I am standing in vast wilderness, nowhere to go. I can walk anywhere I want, and I am trapped. I am held captive by the darkness. Every scenario you could think of, that ran through my mind. Wild hog gang just coming up and deciding to attack me for some reason. Sasquatch. My buddies leaving. I felt like my buddies were just going home. They would think that I was fine and I had the hog and everything. All these things. I'm going to be here all night. I'm probably going to get real cold. I'm in a bad way. In that moment of desperation, I can honestly tell you, I saw no way out. It's the first time in my life I ever remember feeling that way. There was no way out. And this morning, this is what I want to say. There's some of you here, and you feel exactly the same way in your life. There's some of you here, and you feel exactly the same way in an area of your life. If you're really, really willing to be honest about some stuff you've got going on, or about some stuff you've got going on inside of you, this is what you would say: you are held captive by that darkness. Do you hear me? You're trapped by it. Controlled by it. You're ensnared in something and you don't see a way out of it. You know you're there, and this is the truth. Many of you, you don't know exactly how you got there. Some of you, you can look and you can see the decisions that led you to where you are, but here's the truth. You were just going along in life, and at some point you looked up and the lights were off, the map wasn't working, and your radio didn't have any power, and you thought, there is no way I'm ever going to get out of this. There's no way I'm ever going to be free of what I've got going on right now. I'm never going to be free of how it is I feel. Never going to be free of this thing. You know what we commonly call that in the world today? Anytime I begin to teach on something like this, I know where our minds go. For many of us, it goes to an addiction. And that is probably the most common reference that we use when talking about being trapped or being held captive by something, is an addiction. And that's the state of being compulsively committed to a habit or the practice to the point that it has significant negative effects in your life. But I'm going to be honest with you, I don't want this to just be limited to addiction today, because it's not just addiction that can hold you captive. It's a part of it. It's definitely a piece of it. And that may be what your issue is. But I want to tell you, there's a lot more to it than that. So this message and what we're going to talk about today, this miracle that we're going to talk about, it's not just about addiction. As a matter of fact, the Bible uses another word for this. The Bible describes these traps or these places of captivity or these ensnarements in our lives. He describes them as strongholds. Have you ever heard that before, church? Strongholds. Let me explain the word to you. The Greek word ohiroma is stronghold in the Bible. It's used around 50 times, and most often this word is used to describe a fortress or a tall-walled, barricaded place. It's also often used to describe a prison. So here would be the definition of a stronghold. A stronghold is an impenetrable, unescapable compound. You got it? That's what a stronghold is in the Bible. However, in the Bible, it's not merely used as an architectural description. In 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 3, Paul uses the word, ohiroma, stronghold, to describe something else. Look at this. For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, the weapons we use, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. Now, do you think Paul is talking about buildings? No. Paul is talking about something spiritual. Paul is talking about something that is inside of us and that can be built inside of us. Paul isn't talking about buildings. He's using the word strongholds to describe areas of our lives where we may be trapped or where we may be held captive. He's talking about unescapable, impenetrable places within us. He describes, if you go and you read this, he describes these strongholds as being strongholds of mind, strongholds of thought pattern, attitudes, habits, weaknesses, or sin, or maybe even addictions, like we said. These strongholds become so prevalent and controlling in our life that we end up being held captive by them. They're built up, walled like fortresses in our lives. They become a place of attack in us. Do you understand this? You understand what I'm saying? I know this is y'all good? Church, say we good. These places that get built up inside of these addictions or this sin or these thought patterns, they become a place where we're attacked from. They become a place in our lives that we begin to experience damage from. They hurt our lives. More importantly, they prevent us from ever experiencing the full, peaceful life that God offers. They're strongholds that end up building us. But how do they come to be there? Don't be mistaken, whether it's an addiction that holds you or a rooted sin, an attitude or a weakness that binds you, this battle is a spiritual one that is fought. Do you understand that? The reason Paul says the weapons we need to wage this war have divine power, these are weapons from God to demolish strongholds. The reason he says that is because stronghold battles are spiritual battles. That's what I want, and I want to make sure you understand that. If it's anxiety, or if it's depression, or if it's an attitude, or if it's a weakness, or if it's a sin, or if it's an addiction, you need to understand that the battle you're in is a spiritual battle, and these things have been built in you because of a spiritual war. You see that? Can I give you an example of what I'm talking about? Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, this is what Paul writes. He says, "For we are not fighting against flesh and blood and enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in the dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places." Now listen to me. This is not getting weird. We're being real. I'm telling you what the Bible says. Whether you like it or not, something you need to understand is you are at war. And you are at war with evil and darkness and dark spirits in this world. Do you understand that? You're at war. You have an enemy. You have an enemy, and that enemy has an army. He is the devil, and the Bible tells us that he has demons at his disposal, and whether you like it or not, you are engaged in spiritual warfare with them. And a huge portion of their strategy is to build strongholds in you. They want to build strongholds in your life. These mighty powers of darkness seek to influence you towards sin. They seek to influence you towards negative thoughts. They want to influence you towards addiction. They want to create the habit of these things in your life. Whatever it is, that's what they want to do. They want to send you to something that's going to swallow you up. They want to build these strongholds in your life. You say, "Tim, how do they do it?" Can I talk real with you for a second? This is how I think they do it. They use influence. They speak to our minds. They speak in our ears, and this is what they do. They say, "Go ahead. Try it. You deserve it. It's okay. It's no big deal. Smoke it. Watch it. Get it. Text them. Reach out to them. Do whatever it is you want." They say these things to us. They speak to our minds. They're building something. Don't be deceived. They're building something. They get you headed into this pit. They get you fully committed. They create these habits in our lives. They create these addictions. They create these thought patterns in our life. And then as soon as they feel like they've got you as deep in the pit as they can get you, they flip the script. And then they say, "Oh, that's terrible. That's awful. How could you do that? What if people found out? What if your spouse ever saw? You can never let other people know that you got this problem, That is, you are worthless. This is trash. You're useless. You're a liar. You're a hypocrite. And next thing you know, they spoke to your mind so much, you're just standing up there just packing mortar in the cracks of a stronghold, because the last thing you want is anybody to ever get in and any of it to ever get out. It's impenetrable and it's unescapable. Does that make sense? One day, you'll just be going along, dealing with that thing in your life as you have, and all of a sudden, you just want out. You just want rid of it. I want to say something. If you're here today and you know that describes you and something you got in your life, what I'm about to talk about was meant for you. I'm talking to you. Hey, if you got a stronghold in your life you don't want out of it, I'm not talking to you. But if you know you felt that way, you can see clearly that something has been built in you. And it's holding you captive. It may very well be that you're in need of the fourth category of miracles, which is miracles of deliverance. Miracles of deliverance. Some of you need to be rescued from this stronghold. You need to be delivered from the bondage of this stronghold. Miracles of deliverance are where God enters the impenetrable stronghold. He breaks through the walls. He gathers us up in His hands, and He leads us to freedom out of the stronghold. That is a miracle of deliverance. You know what I'm talking about? Can I tell you a Bible story that I believe illustrates a miracle of deliverance? Okay? She's good with it. Anybody else? In Acts chapter 12, we are told that that's where we're going to be today. We're told that the Apostle James, John's brother, has just been killed by a king named King Herod Agrippa. Now, Agrippa at this time, you have to understand, was on a rampage. This was what? He was kill the Christians, stop the Jesus movement. That's all he wanted to do. He was tired of hearing about it. It was causing trouble in his kingdom. He just wanted rid of this Jesus movement. So he had just killed James. And after doing that, he saw that it actually pleased the Jewish community what he had done. So he thought, well, if I've got their approval on James, then I'm going to round up as many of these apostles as I can, and I'm going to take care of them. So he made a move to capture another key player in the Jesus movement, a man named Peter. Now, y'all know Peter, right? The Apostle Peter. And so King Agrippa sends his soldiers, and they're able to find Peter and arrest him during the Jewish Passover celebration. Now, because that Passover was going on, a lot of the Jews, they were in the middle of that. So King Agrippa decided what he would do is wait until the Passover celebration was over. He would hold a public trial, and he would take care of Peter. To ensure that Peter didn't get away, to ensure Peter's imprisonment, King Agrippa did this. He got 4 squads of 4 soldiers. How many people is that? 16, thank you. I needed help. 16 guards. And he took Peter to a prison, a tall, walled, gated prison. And he placed him in the innermost cell of the prison. He chained him with 2 chains. I don't know if he was chained to the wall, but he may have been chained to 2 guards. There was 1 guard on either side of him in the cell. Okay? Then there were guards outside of the cell. And then we're told there was an outpost or a posted guard just outside in the courtyard. He had some guards there. And then there was a second posting of guards near the city or near the compound exit. And there were guards there as well. Do you think King Agrippa is making sure that Peter doesn't get out? That's what I think too. Acts chapter 12, verse 5, this is what it says happens though. But while Peter was in prison, the church prayed very earnestly for him. Do you see that? What is that? Sounds like being a faithful friend. There was a church full of people. This first church, these people that Peter had been teaching, and they realized that Peter was in prison. And they hit their knees, we're told, and they earnestly prayed for him. They prayed intensely. They prayed often for him. I believe they prayed without ceasing for him. They wanted to see Peter leave. You got to see it. They were being faithful friends. Verse 7, this is what it says, happens inside the cell. Suddenly, there was a bright light in the cell. And an angel of the Lord stood before Peter. Now, I'm just going to read this. Y'all with me? The angel struck him on the side to awaken him. Now, hang on a second. You got to see this. Apparently, Peter wakes up like me. And a bright light wasn't enough. And I don't know why in my mind, this is just what I see. I see that the angel arrives with the bright light. Peter doesn't move in the corner, and he gets over there and he goes, Peter, Peter, struck him in the side. That's what I see. Just telling you, that's what I see. That's the way Brittany wakes me up sometimes. Look at this. And he said, quick, get up. Now look at this. He says to Peter, quick, get up. Peter gets up. Chains, what does it say happens? Chains fell off of his wrist. Then the angel told him, get dressed and put on your sandals. And what does it say he did? He did it, right? Get up and put on your sandals. And he did. Now, step 3, put on your coat and follow me. The angel ordered. So Peter left the cell following the angel, and I love this. It says, but all the time he thought it was a vision. He didn't realize it was actually happening. He's sleepwalking, guys. You see that? Peter, this is such a surreal experience that Peter's doing all of the things that the angel says. He's like, yes, I'm going. And he goes, and he doesn't realize it's actually happening. That's pretty cool. They passed the first post of guards. And then they passed the second. Now think about this. They're walking past these guard posts, right? Walking past the second guard post and came to the iron gate leading to the city, which was under lock and key. And this is what it says. And this opened for them all by itself. So they passed through and they started walking down the street. And then the angel suddenly left him. Just went away. And Peter finally came to his senses. And he said, it's really true, he said. The Lord has sent an angel and saved me from Herod and from the Jewish leaders, from what the Jewish leaders had planned to do for me. That's a pretty cool story, isn't it? Did you see anything about miracles that we need to learn? Specifically about miracles of deliverance. If I'm telling you, this is important. If you're in a dark place right now, you need to be listening. If you just want out of whatever it is, whatever stronghold it is that is holding you, I'm telling you, you better listen to this. Ready? Everybody ready? Yes. Miracles are uniquely complex. Now stick with me. Miracles are uniquely complex. When God performs a miracle, if there's one thing I noticed in this story and in pretty much all the other stories I've told, is there is often a complex set of instructions and plans that God puts in place, and they are very different from one person to the next, from one miracle to another. If you and I were writing miracles, Ernie, if me and you were writing miracles, it'd be pretty straightforward, right? You need money, what would you get? Money, right? It would make sense. It would just be like, there it is in front of you, right? It would just happen. Y'all know that scene from Bruce Almighty? Y'all may not like Jim Carrey. You may not like that movie, but I don't care. But I want to use it this morning because there's this scene in Bruce Almighty where he's God. And so he's getting all these prayers, and he puts them all and lumps them all on the computer, and he's trying to answer them one at a time. And then finally he's just like, you know what? Yes to all. Reply all. And just clicks it. And so everybody's getting everything they want. If you and I were in charge of miracles and we saw somebody who needed one, it would just happen. You know, if I'm God and I can do whatever I want, it would just be clear, cut, and dry, to be as straightforward as it can possibly be. But it appears to me that when God performs a miracle, he chooses to make them complex sometimes, and really they seem to be geared very uniquely from one case to the next. So often the way God performs the miracles, they're unusual and they're processed And sometimes they're just difficult to understand why he chose the way he did. You understand this? God could poof Peter, right? He could poof him. You know what I mean? He could go, and Peter be out of the prison. But instead, God could do it without an angel. You understand that, right? He could do it without any. But for some reason in this story, and for Peter, what God chose to do was God chose to send an angel who woke him up in the middle of the cell with these other 2 guards sleeping there, and he poked him, and he woke him up, and he says, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get you dressed. We're going to get you ready. One step at a time. Now follow me. And then he said, we're going to walk right past this first guard post. Then we're going to go walk right past this second guard post. And then instead of trying to find another way around the wall, I'm just going to take you up to the city gate, and the city gate's going to fall open for us. That's how it's going to happen. It was a very specific set of instructions. God could do whatever he wants. He can make it as easy as possible, yet we see him constantly choosing details and processes and steps in order to perform the miracles he wants. Does this make sense to y'all? Think back to our other stories in the series, real quick. Miracles of authority, Joshua on the battlefield, right? God could have ended that battle right outside of Gibeon, right? He already had them so confused, he could have ended the Bible right there. But what we ended up with was Joshua having to make a decision to continue to chase this enemy, death, hell raining down on them, Joshua turning and praying to God to hold the sun still in the sky, and God did it. That's pretty complex, wouldn't you say? It's a pretty unique situation as well for Joshua. Do you see this? When we talk about miracles of healing, I told you all sorts of things that Jesus performed. And when you watch Jesus healing people, he does it different from one person to the next. Some people he just spoke to, some people he touched. So, take the blind men, for example. Jesus spoke to one blind man, healed him. With another blind man, he spit in mud and rubbed it in his eyes and healed him. Why? He didn't have to spit in mud and rub it in the dude's eyes. But there was a reason for that. There was something personal for that. Think about the story from last week, that miracle of provision. Think about all the things that had to happen in order for Elijah and this widow to come together. And then there was just a little bit of flour and a little bit of oil, and the instructions were very specific. Make one for Elijah, then make one for yourself. It was uniquely complex. Y'all seeing my point? This is what I believe we see about miracles. God's miracles are uniquely complex, and they are that way for the person he's performing the miracle for. God chooses to perform those miracles, and specifically, I believe, miracles of deliverance in a way that best suits his plan and his will for the person's life. God chooses the miracles to be a certain way in order to take this person where they're supposed to go, in order to make this person into who they are supposed to be, in order to grow their faith to the place that it needs to be in for the next leg of their journey. That's why when God performs a miracle, it's not just a poof. When God performs a miracle, it's not just, here it is, as straightforward as possible. There's always something to it. He is trying to take us somewhere, one step at a time. Do you understand? In miracles of deliverance, I believe it is even more prominent that it is this way, that these miracles are complex. And I believe that perhaps the complexity and the focus of miracles of deliverance is because so much has to happen in that process in order for us to really experience the freedom from that stronghold. Did y'all catch that? Is everybody still with me this morning? Yes. I believe God's miracles of deliverance are uniquely complex, and I believe that the reason is because God has to do so much in order to break the hold of those strongholds. That's what I believe. A lot's got to happen. You see, God has to simultaneously tear down walls. He has to break chains that are holding us. He has to protect us from an enemy who wants to keep us there. He has to get us involved in order to grow our faith, in order to strengthen our resolve. And at the same time, in a miracle of deliverance, He's got to love on us and take care of us and show compassion to us because we're so beaten up and we're so broken down and we're so doggone scared. That's the truth. God has to do a lot in a miracle of deliverance. So don't be surprised in a miracle of deliverance if what He asks of us is uniquely complex and what He does is uniquely complex for us. So what do you do with that lesson? What do you do with it? Knowing that God is going to have this intricate, involved, different, unique set of plans for each one of us who needs to be delivered. What do you do with that information? How do we respond to that? Can I tell you what you do? Church, are y'all good? You tell me what? You be cooperative with God. You do what He tells you to do. Deliverance happens when we do what is asked of us. When God says, get up, the chains fall off when we get up. When God says, put your clothes on, the guards stay asleep. When God says, follow me, we're going to walk right past this guard post and we go, I don't know if I want to go right. Well, do we have to go right past the guards? Could we not avoid the post? God says, no, we're going to walk right by them. We're going to deal with them. I'm going to show you something right here. You walk right by the guard post. When God says we're going to walk past the second guard post, you walk past the second part. When God says we're going to the gate, and you go, that doesn't make any sense. That's what Peter did, right? Peter just followed him right to this iron gate, and when he got to the iron gate that was locked, it fell open at his feet. Peter did every single thing that God asked of him, that the angel passed this instruction along to him, and he followed it to the letter. And here was the cool part. He didn't even realize it was working. And I want to tell you something. When he got it, he realized he was delivered. So often, that is what happens when we are delivered, when we have chosen to cooperate with God and do everything that He asks us to do in order to be delivered. One day, you're just walking, and you look up, and you go, I'm free of that thing. I don't want that no more. I don't need that anymore. I don't think that way anymore. It has no hold on me anymore. You'll be just like Peter and you'll realize I've been delivered and I didn't even know it was happening because I was just following God one step at a time out of this pit, out of this unescapable, impenetrable place. He came and He got me, and we did it a step at a time. That is how a miracle of deliverance works. But you have to be cooperative with Him. If we have any hope of deliverance, we need to do what God tells us, no matter how unusual it sounds, no matter how unique it may sound or how different it would be, or we have to do it even if it's not what we've seen other people do, because there's a good chance that God has a complex set of instructions and plans for us to get us out of this stronghold, to deliver us. And it may not look like anything anybody else has done. And it's probably not going to be what any average people do. And it's probably going to be really hard. And it's probably going to be scary. And it's probably not going to make sense to us. That's the truth. Can I give you some examples? That really I'm talking to two groups of people. Let me talk to the first one first. If you're somebody in here this morning and you know somebody needs delivered from something, you know somebody and you know they've got a problem, or they're walking into a problem, or you see that the enemy is building a stronghold in their life, and you feel that God has pointed it out to you, and you feel that God has said you should say something to them, I'm going to tell you what you should do. You should say it. Now listen to me, that's hard. You should say it. If God has pointed it out to you and God says, your friend over here or your family member, this person that you love, you see what's happening in their life and there's a stronghold being built in them, and I'm telling you, the enemy is going to drag them down. The enemy is going to hold on to them, and he says to you, you need to say something to them, then by George, you better say it. No matter how uncomfortable it makes you, no matter how much it may affect that relationship and make it awkward for a while, you better say it. And you do that in love. You be cooperative with God and you say what needs to be said. Because if we're not doing that, who's going to do it? It may very well be that you're, I hate to do this, the angel that has been sent. You're not an angel, none of you, okay? An angel aren't people, but we're not getting into that, okay? But you may be the voice for that. You may be the voice of instruction from God that ushers somebody out of a stronghold. Now, if you're somebody who needs delivered, and you're somebody that I've been talking to this entire time, I want to tell you, God may ask you to do some things, and they may be very unique, and they may be very complex, and they may be scary. But I want to tell you something. If God says to come clean to someone, that you need accountability, and that it's your friend or it's a family member or it's a person, and he points to them and he says, you know what, you need to tell them what you got going. You need to tell them that problem you got. You need to just own up that to them. I want to tell you what you better do. You better do it and be cooperative with God. That may be the first step. That may be when the chains fall off. Are you listening to me? God says, hey, you need to go check yourself in at that rehab place. And you go, well, I got a job and I got this and I got that. I can't go to that rehab place. I want to tell you something. You better do it. That may very well be a piece of God's plan for you to beat this stronghold. If God says, go get you some counseling, and you say, well, I ain't never had counseling. Me and my family, that just ain't something we do, you know. I'm a little weird about going sitting in a room talking to somebody. I'm going to tell you what you better do. You better go get you some counseling. God says get rid of those friends. What should you do? Get rid of them. You're like, God would say that? Yeah. He'll say right now, they're influencing you. And you need to ease away. Because they're building up that stronghold in your life. God says quit going to that place. God says log off of social media. God says cut the phone off when you get home. God says throw the TV in the garbage can. God says whatever. God says quit staying up late by yourself at night. Whatever He says, here will be my encouragement. Be cooperative and doing it, because the path to deliverance, I'm telling you guys, it'll be different and it'll be hard, but it will be worth it. It'll be worth it. And there is nothing I want more for many of you than to see you delivered from what it is that holds you. You hear me? Let me pray for you. God, there are people in this church that need to be delivered. There are people that we love that we want to see delivered. God, this is my prayer. My prayer is first that they will look to you. My prayer is that they will call to you. My prayer is that they will begin to bring their situation, first of all, to you. My prayer is that they will begin to talk to you about it, God, and that you will begin to lead them out of it. But God, this is it. Tell them what to do. Tell them every step as it's the next one. Tell them every single step. God, I'll never forget what it was like that night, walking out in that moment that I realized that there was a little hump on the side of the trail from the horses that had rode down it. And I found that with my feet. And I inched my way out of that mountain. I'll never forget what it felt like to see that thin line of that gravel road and realize that Thank God I made it back to my truck. This is my prayer as I'm praying for some gravel road moments for the people in this room, where they just look up and realize that they have been delivered. God, lead us to you. I'm excited about this next message as well. I'm excited to have the opportunity to talk to them about what is most important, and that's trusting you. Father, we love you and we thank you. In Jesus' name, everybody says, Amen. Amen.